must constantly look at things in a different way.
The Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast was created by two physical therapists out of the desire to learn more about the different educational roles in physical therapy and healthcare, and how healthcare education works by talking with educational leaders and people with different perspectives within physical therapy and across interdisciplinary lines on how education can be improved to disrupt the status quo of healthcare education. This is our journey, and thanks for listening. Are you a third-year physical therapy student that excels on tests when you have study guides, checklists, and deadlines? With all of the information available about how to prepare for the NPTE, it's easy to get disorganized and not feel prepared going into the big day. NPTE Prep Success is an online course that provides PT students easy-to-use study guides and step-by-step guidance through the NPTE preparation. To learn more, visit kylericeprep.com. Thank you again all for your continued support, and now for the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. F. Scott Field, and I'm joined by a longtime friend of the podcast, Dr. Kenneth Miller, and his co-author, Dr. Melissa Bednarek. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the podcast to talk about all things textbook related. We have not had an episode about this yet, so you guys fresh off a new textbook being released, I'm excited to talk to you guys about this stuff. So I guess, Melissa, let's start with you. If you wouldn't mind, tell our audience a little bit about your academic journey and how it led you to where you are today.
So great to be here. Thanks for asking us to join you. So I've been a clinician for 20 plus years, sort of, background in acute care. And during that time, I sort of found myself enjoying teaching, whether that was patients, whether that was other healthcare providers in the hospital setting. So I was like, I might be interested in students. So I actually went back to school for a terminal degree and have now been teaching at Chatham University for approaching 13 years. So, I've taken my additional clinical experience in home health and pulmonary rehab and sort of, I'm able to kind of bring the clinic to the classroom. So teaching, and certainly part of an academic position being scholarship. So that's sort of how I got to this point.
Yeah, that's awesome. I kind of did something similar. I was in the clinic for about 15 years, a lot of outpatient ortho. I thought I was going to be an ortho bro for life. And then, took a couple different turns, ended up in geriatrics, and all of a sudden I'm doing home health and sniff predominantly, and, worked on my terminal degree, but I didn't think I was going to use it. And then COVID hit and things kind of shifted pretty rapidly, and they needed somebody to teach geriatrics and wound care and intro to patient care and stuff, and I fit the bill. So that worked out pretty well. Ken, if you wouldn't mind, can tell our audience a little bit about your academic journey, because I know you're kind of new to the state of Texas now. So catch us up to where you're at now and what you're up to.
So I know that you and I know this, but not everyone knows this, that we grew up in the same area in New York on Long Island in islip. And it's funny that I focus on balance early in my career since it's called islip. But thanks again for having me here for the broadcast. As far as my background, I started, when I first graduated, I started in pediatrics for a couple of years. And after a couple of years working in pediatrics, my back started to bother me being on the ground and doing all of the kneeling and bending and things like that. So I decided I needed to work where I could sit on a stool and be on a higher, a mat or whatever. So I ended up working in geriatrics, and I loved it. And I had a long career in geriatrics working in home health. And I started as a clinician for the first 10 years of my career. And then after practicing about 10 years, I decided I wanted to do something more. So then I went back for my transitional DPT. I finished that in 2 years, and that really opened up many other doors for me. And that's what started me in teaching. So I was an adjunct at Toro College for over 10 years. And so 3 years ago, I took a full-time position at the University of North Texas Health Science Center in the Department of Physical Therapy. And that's in Fort Worth. And I've been there now, like I said, 3 years. And my area of expertise and practice and education for the students is development in geriatrics, pharmacology, cardiopulmonary. I love working with the older adults, and sharing that knowledge with the students have been really rewarding.
Yeah, I agree. For whatever reason, geriatrics really has been way more fun than I ever imagined it would be. And I love the population. I love working with them. So now I love teaching about it. It's good when it all kind of falls in line like that. So if you guys wouldn't mind, let's start off with this one. This is kind of a big one, but let's start off with your why behind writing a textbook. What was your reasoning for it? What pushed you to do this? Melissa, let's start with you, and then we'll come back to Ken.
So, it's interesting. I don't know if I sort of, woke up one day and was like, oh, this would be a new adventure. So I actually recently shared with Ken the story, in my office, at Chatham, they always recommend above your computer to have some sort of picture or something, not necessarily your degrees, but, when you kind of look away from the screen. So what I chose to put there was actually a poster I had that sort of, I think, kind of become my mantra. And it's, nice picture of a lighthouse and everything, but it says success. The secret of success in life is to be ready for opportunity when it comes. So it's just sort of, that's sort of how I almost kind of ended up here. So I had an opportunity a number of years ago to join an initiative actually that Ken was at the root of. So just again, even before we knew each other. And essentially it involves an advanced competency in home health. So certification in home health. And sort of I got involved in it and was asked to write a pharmacology module. So that program is up and running, and it's been a real pleasure to be able to be a part of it. And basically that module sort of caught the eye of the author of the textbook. So Chacon's pharmacology textbook. As he approaches retirement, the publisher was looking forward to sort of continue on. It's a certainly well-respected textbook in the field. They kind of found my work on the APTA Learning Center and sort of reached out. And, so that's sort of how I got connected. And then sort of along this time, this was around the very beginning of the pandemic. And through another sort of connection, I actually sort of just reached out to Ken. Literally was just like, you don't really know me, kind of have similar backgrounds. Actually, my clinical background is primarily in cardiovascular and pulmonary. And I know Ken has done some work in that as well as pharmacology. So we kind of collaborated on another couple projects. So, one thing led to another and we kind of joined and, we had the opportunity at this point to be co-editors for an updated 5th edition that was just released. So, again, I think back to that poster, sort of just be ready for opportunity when it comes. I couldn't have predicted this path, but just sort of taking advantage of the opportunities as they come along.
Yeah, the poster I have over my computer is a kitten hanging off of the tree, and it says "hang in there," So totally hear you on the motivational posters. I probably need to up my game a little bit, though, it sounds like. Ken, how about you? What was your why behind this project and really getting into the nitty-gritty of it?
So my story is pretty similar to Melissa's as far as I wasn't looking to create a textbook. Like, it wasn't part of my plan. It certainly is something that's been very rewarding now that I've done it, and a lot of work. But it wasn't part of my plan that when I got my DPT, I want to write a textbook. When I was first asked by Melissa to join the project, I said, I think I have a lot to contribute. We had some conversations and we saw that this is the 5th edition of the textbook. The fact that it went to 5 editions and it has Chacon's name on it, he is a pioneer in bringing pharmacology to our discipline. So we both had conversations about, wow, I hope we do this justice. We really want to make sure that we're doing something to help it continue to evolve and grow. But I feel like our backgrounds, my specifically, and I know with Melissa, we've discussed this, that we have something to add to the content now that we're moving towards really looking at value-based care and looking at things from a new lens and DE&I and all of these things. We really wanted to make sure that the book is reflective of updated culture. And so I'll speak for myself. That's, to me, has been one of the most rewarding parts of this work, is seeing all of the great work that's been there and seeing that there's work to do and that we really can update it to make it much more useful. The 5th edition was 2015. So, it was time for an update. New meds are added. We have added stuff about COVID, vaccinations. So we needed to update the book, which we did, and we're happy with it. But we think the 6th edition is going to be a bigger change with the table of contents. And we're hoping that, that it'll be well received.
That's awesome, man. I mean, you guys both kind of brought up a really good point. And that's, you didn't plan to write a text, but it kind of just fell into your lap a little bit, right? It was an opportunity and you were there to seize it. And I think, that's so huge in our careers, especially as physical therapists. Like, I didn't plan on teaching, I finished my terminal degree in 2018 and thought, I'll do that when I retire. That'll be something fun to do. I'll teach. But then COVID hit and, I decided to pivot a little bit and kind of exit out of the clinic. And, just being there and ready and available for those opportunities and seizing them when they come is a huge thing for everybody's career. But I think especially physical therapy, because we have such a great knowledge base and a great skill set. And I've been talking about this a lot lately. It opens the doors for us to do a lot of really cool things. We just have to be open to it. And we have to, like I said, be ready to pounce on it when the opportunity does present itself.
Just something to sort of add to that is, definitely being open to opportunities, and there can be many of them. And sometimes you have to make choices, and sometimes you sort of take advantage of opportunities that you think could lead to something. And unfortunately, sometimes they don't, but, you sort of have to kind of balance that. I've certainly sort of started on projects that I thought had great potential and sort of didn't sort of end up the way I thought. But so it's sort of difficult to tell at the very beginning which ones will sort of lead to more and which ones might not.
Yeah. A lot of them are worth taking the chance, though, at least.
I'd like to add also, the reason that Melissa and I both had this opportunity, I speak specifically for myself, is my involvement in APTA and my involvement in the different committees and task forces and the academies really helped me network and get to know many people. But it also gave me the opportunity to get experience in creating different work products. If I had not had that background, then the idea of writing a textbook would certainly be overwhelming. But having had that background, I felt supported. We've written other monographs, each of us individually. We've created other resources for home health. The 3rd edition book was published a few years ago. We're updating the 4th edition book, and Melissa said yes to being on that project, so that's great. So we've had a number of other publications. So I think writing a textbook is a really wonderful thing. It's all the other things that helped get me to this point. And I think Melissa would echo the same sentiment, that it's all of our other work that's got us to where we are now.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. And I've never been a big fan of luck, like, oh, he's lucky or she's lucky, or, oh, look how lucky they are. I feel like if you put in the work and if you do the right things to grow, and really expand your comfort zones a little bit, network with the right people, get involved in those projects that may or may not turn into something, right? That's what leads to the opportunities. And then you being available and ready to take those opportunities. It's not luck, it's a lot of hard work leading up to that point, so I commend you guys both for doing all the hard work on the front end to now put together an even harder project on the back end, so thank you guys for that and for, doing your part to advance the field. Let's talk a little bit about the collaboration process. It sounds like you guys are a really good yin and yang to each other. It seems like between your experiences, there's enough differentiation, but also enough overlap that it really made sense to work together. I've written a book myself. It's not peer reviewed or anything like that. It's, I wrote it by myself, but if I were to do a textbook, I think I would definitely want a team on board with me. I wouldn't want to go at it alone. Talk a little bit about the collaboration process. What do you look for? What works, what doesn't? If somebody was looking to start, getting together to write a textbook with some people, what does that collaboration process look like?
Actually, I'll share a story that I don't even know if I've actually told Ken. So as I sort of mentioned, the beginning of the pandemic, there's some sort of, webinar series in that, and sort of I got involved with one through the cardiovascular and pulmonary, the academy, and it was about essentially COVID in the home. So how to sort of manage COVID. I mean, we're talking like March of 2020. And I remember at the time, sort of, through my involvement with the cardiovascular and pulmonary academy, I was sort of part of a group that said yes, and they sort of brought me in for my home health experience. And I sort of quickly realized, I was just like, yes, I have home health experience, but I'm also full-time in academia, and Ken was somebody I thought of immediately in terms of home health. So that's where I actually sort of reached out to him. And I just remember the very first, so as this group was putting together a webinar and everything, and this is sort of, he responded to my email, and and he's sort of with his home health experience kind of helping to organize the group. So it was great. And I just remember as he's kind of like, suggesting the bullet points to include, I was so impressed. I was like, he's so organized, his experience, he's able to convey it. So even from that first sort of planning meeting, which was a completely different project, I just remember, I could just see that we kind of thought through the same way, through the same process. And, we had that, and then sort of our connection with home health. I mean, this is even before farm, the connection with home health led to some PACER series, a webinar and things like that. And, from then on, and at that point, it was just he and I that collaborated on it. But just, I remember that very first webinar, Ken, I don't know if you remember that as well, but I was just like, wow, it's like, he was just like, I suggest we do, this, and this. And I was like, this is organized and great.
Yeah, I do remember that when we got started back on PACER and how you had asked me, and you actually even mentioned to me at one point, you just took the reins and you just gave us the outline and knew what we needed to do from your perspective, relating it to the home health audience that we wanted to reach. To answer your question in a different way in terms of collaboration, I'd have to say that part of my own leadership style in terms of being chair or director in the different roles I've had, I always look to try to find people that are not alike. Honestly, I try to find people that have different skill sets. So I look for people that have different areas of practice, different populations they work with. The last thing that I would want to have at a table where we're having conversations, making decisions, is to have a table of yes people. And so to me, that's really critical. So for the 4th edition book, we have over 27 different contributors for the 4th edition handbook for home health. And so I was sure to pick people from all the different regions of the country, people that worked in for-profit, worked in not-for-profit, hospital-based, non-hospital-based, freestanding, people that were in academia, people that were thinking about academia, people that didn't want to do anything with academia, people that were working in the field, people that were administrators. So I really tried to get a broad representation because I think you're stronger when you're diverse. I really believe that you get a better product and you have better, richer conversations when you have a variety of different influences there.
Yeah, diversity is huge and becoming more important, right, in our field lately. And I think getting out of that echo chamber, like you talked about, becomes really important. You don't want a box of yes men or yes women, right? Bobbleheads just shaking along, right? But I think, it also does seem like a really good idea to have somebody who's maybe different than, each other, so that their strengths kind of overshadow your weaknesses and vice versa, right? You can help them out with some of their weaknesses, and you play into your strengths, they play into theirs, and all of a sudden you've got this great product with 2 or 3 strengths all shining through. I like that idea. Well, tell us a little bit about the writing process, right? I was an English major before I was a physical therapist, so I love writing. I ran into a brick wall when I got into scientific writing and realized that was a completely different beast, and I couldn't just flower everything up and make it, sound pretty. So tell us a little bit about your writing styles and the process of putting together, such a large project like a textbook.
So I guess I'll start with this one. As far as the writing process, we were very fortunate for the 5th edition, but the fact that we were updating it. And for the 4th edition of the home health book, we're also updating the 3rd edition. We already have outlines. We already have narrative to look at, to review and update. So that makes the process a little bit easier to follow instead of starting with a blank sheet of paper. As far as if we were starting with a blank sheet of paper, I would say that you would need to first know what's the purpose of what you're writing, and then go from there to develop an outline, and then just continue to flesh out the outline in terms of, are we making sure that we are reaching, we're coming back to the purpose of what we're writing. And then as you flesh out the information, you then get the references and the citations to show, either side of what you're looking to research in terms of the home health product. Really, we wanted to make sure we were hitting all of the areas of home health in terms of practice, in terms of regulation. So we had a nice outline, and that's where really collaboration comes in, to get all of the ideas on paper and making sure that you're not missing anything. So, first thing is find out what the purpose is for what you're doing. And then from there, form an outline and then flesh out the outline. And then definitely get stakeholder involvement, external stakeholders, internal stakeholders, to look at it to make sure that you're not missing anything. I mean, that's how I, that's my recommendation. That's how I got started with what we put together. Melissa, what do you think?
So I think, having the opportunity, even though we did update the 5th edition, we definitely did add some updated materials. So for example, an updated 5th edition that was just released for the pharmacology textbook, certainly since, the 2015-16, when the 5th edition was released, there's been a lot more out on, for example, pain management. So actually we identified that as an area that we wanted to include in the update. And sort of go, so as we talked about it and had identified it, Ken has done some previous work. So he kind of took the lead. So I think going back to thinking about the different perspectives around the table. So even between he and I, he had done some previous work that on that. So it sort of made sense that he would take the lead. And then I'm sort of, we co-editors of this updated edition. So, I mean, I'm sort of providing feedback. And then there were some other areas that I kind of took the lead on, adding text and all of that too. So again, even within just the two of us, we kind of come from certainly similar, but yet, different experiences. So I think it's sort of a matter of taking advantage of that, that pool of talent that you have around you, whatever project you're on, and kind of setting up a system that way.
Yeah. And, Melissa, you just prompted me to come back to the book. We purposely went through the table of contents together as a whole. And then after we looked through that, then we actually went through the chapters. And so we did not write the whole thing all at once. We were writing it chapter by chapter, topic by topic. Honestly, if I were to look at the whole thing and say, I got to start writing all of these chapters at once, that just would have been an overwhelming project. So we just broke it down and we did, we actually did it unit by unit. Within the unit, we broke the unit down to whatever number of chapters it had. And then we just worked through it together. And then we would meet and review our edits and our new content. Yes, that makes sense. No, that doesn't. We need to tweak it. We need this or that. And so it was a really good collaboration that we've had. It's funny how we complement each other so much. And it just started from a cold phone call, where it's like, I know you were in the similar circles. Would you like to be involved in this? And it was a pacer, not even the book itself at that point. And I'm like, sure, let's get together and work on it. And, it was very, very good to work on and very enjoyable to be able to collaborate and make some good things happen for people that were in the field at that point. They needed information about COVID and we got it out within a couple of weeks. So we were really proud that we could turn things around very quickly. Yeah, that's awesome. I think the takeaway from that, for me at least, is don't be afraid to reach out. People are out there. If you admire what they're doing, you like what they're doing, you kind of dig their vibe, just reach out, got to ask.
I even remember when I sent the email, I kind of sure responded within 24 hours, but the first 12, I was like, maybe he's not going to respond. Maybe he's not going to respond.
Yeah, it's tough, like I've been the fanboy before. I've reached out to people and been like, oh my goodness, I wonder if they're going to respond, and they, sure enough, they do. It's crazy. People are just people, they put their pants on the same way as we all do. So, Melissa, that brings me up to a good point that you kind of talked about a little bit, you touched on, but you guys are co-editors for this book. What does the editing process look like? What is it like to be an editor? What is that look like when it comes to textbooks and working on that process?
So, I mean, like Ken kind of outlined the way our approach was. And, again, I personally have never been part of a textbook. So we're kind of, on the one hand, collaborating. So kind of figuring out the process between the two of us, as well as a new project. Ken had, brought experience from the PT in the home from the 3rd edition. So just kind of reading through it, and the sort of the approach we took that kind of worked for, this particular situation is, we would sort of set up an assignment and each independently review whatever, whether it's a unit or a chapter. We each had our own way of making notes, and then we'd get together. I mean, spring of 2021, I had many Saturday morning Zoom sessions with Ken, because then we would sort of talk through and sort of, oh, I missed that, or, I picked up something, or, whatever the case may be. And we sort of kind of, we're able to independently review and then come together. So that's why, I also think there's challenges sometimes with group size. I mean, certainly the larger of a group, you get so many more perspectives and you can get such a rich product, but then sometimes the logistics get challenging. So just with the two of us, this is the approach we sort of took, sort of independently review and then come back and sort of blend our comments.
Yeah, you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. I know how that gets. Well, awesome. Ken, did you have anything to add about the editing process or anything you want to talk about from an editing standpoint?
Yeah, I think that it's important for anyone that is looking to write either peer-reviewed articles included. It's a similar process in terms of having it reviewed. Once it gets accepted for publication, then it's a matter of looking at these different proofs. You'll get proofs that are typeset, and this is what it will look like. And they'll ask you to review it for grammatical mistakes, typos. And so with regards to the books that I've done and Melissa and I've done together, it really comes back to you look at all of the tables, make sure there's no mistakes in the tables. You look at all of the figures, make sure that any of the figures that they're drawn the way they're supposed to be drawn and that they're labeled correctly with the correct colors and things like that. So you look at all of the artwork separately. You look at all the figures and tables separately. All of those are separate documents from the PDF document, which is the proof of the actual narrative. And then at the very end, they put it all together into one single PDF document that you then look through, section by section, and then just provide comments back. Or they'll be asking questions saying, is this what you meant by this? Is this what you wanted here? Is this correct? And so then you just address any of the questions that the publisher may have or the managing editor may have. And then once you have a final proof that everyone has agreed on, then it goes to production, and then it's out of your hands. And then you wait a few weeks or months until you get the copy in your, hand, and and you go from there. And then you take a look at it, and no matter how many times you look at it, there's always things you find after the fact, with a misspelled word or a capital missing or a comma. But you do the best you can, and in the end, you have a nice product.
Which actually brings up a good point. Is we were editing this fifth edition, and I think I was surprised myself in sort of going through this process for the first time that even we're providing updates. After we had provided the updates, we actually went through 2 more rounds of review. So like the publisher actually sent, the aspects of the textbook sort of in chunks to sort of review 2 more times. So, I mean, it's not just submit it and somebody else proofreads it and then it's gone. So, looking forward to, sort of just anticipating that, because I really wasn't anticipating that.
Yeah, the work is never done, right? There's always more and more and more that can be done to it. But at some point you got to submit it and just say, hey, it is what it is. Go forth and learn, right? So you talked a little bit about publishing and the publishers. It sounds like, with the books that you guys are working on, they already had a publisher in place. You were just kind of updating and editing, getting it up to the latest edition. What is the publication process like? What, is there any recommendations you can give for working with a publisher, or what are some things we should be looking for if we're trying to find a publisher? How does that process work?
I'll start, and then Melissa, please add anything that you feel needs to be added. If somebody has an idea for writing a book, they're like, what, this is something that needs to be out there, and I don't see it anywhere. Then the first thing that I would do is to sketch out what a table of contents would look like. Like what's the purpose of what you're looking to create, and then that table of contents really forms the outline. And then at that point, I would recommend looking at the different publishers that you would be willing to work with to publish your book. There are different publishers like F.A. Davis, which is, where the Chacon textbook is. There's also other publishers like Slack. So there's all different publishers. And I would look at their websites to see if what you're looking to publish, they've published already. Because if they have a textbook with that same topic, they're probably not going to publish a second book on the same idea. So that's the first thing I would do, is look to see if it's been published elsewhere. And if it hasn't, then the second thing is if you see multiple publishers where it's not published, and that's when I would look and see, what does the publisher look like in terms of, is it a large publisher? Is it an independent publisher? How do they, are they well known and established? Are they a newer, upstart? Because there's benefits to each of those different types of structures in terms of the publisher. And then once it's determined which publisher you may want to go with, then it's a matter of having an elevator speech to try to contact the publisher and then share the idea. I would just be careful with sharing ideas, just like anything with patents or whatever. Sharing an idea may go to someone else to then take the idea and run with it. So you just need to be aware of and careful what you say when you say it to who.
I definitely agree with that. Actually, recently seeing a colleague sort of do exactly that. And I sort of, witnessed every step that Ken just described. She had an idea for a book, sought out a publisher, worked through it, and actually was just successful in, getting published as well. I think the other thing, like all things in certainly physical therapy and in life, is communication. Our path has been a little bit different in the fact that the F.A. Davis was looking for some authors to continue this, so sort of sought us out. And we have a couple contacts within F.A. Davis, and that's been certainly extremely helpful for any questions. And just, as we're learning about the process, the number of rounds of edition or the number of rounds of edits. And, I remember at one point I was like, sort of asking, I was like, how many rounds are we going to have? So just again, that communication and everything, like all things is really important. So I think Ken did a great job of outlining how to sort of, connect with a publisher, but then sort of once you make that connection, they're certainly willing to answer any questions, from their different departments, et cetera.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's about relationships, I think, right? You've got to feel good about the relationship with your publisher. I ended up eventually just self-publishing my book because, like I said, it wasn't a peer review process or anything like that needed to be, vetted heavily. But I think realistically, especially in the world of textbooks, it seems like publishers have a good portion of the work to do even after you've done all the work. Now they've got to get it out there and they've got to sell it, right? That's the next step. So let's talk about this kind of final phase here. What about marketing? What does that look like? How much do you have to do versus how much does the publisher have to do versus how much is just kind of done for you because it's the literal textbook on it, And then I guess my question then is, well, then what's next? Right? Once you guys have done this, you've put it out there to the world, it's published and it's, cranking in money left and right, you guys are making the big bucks. What comes next? Right. So talk a little bit about that marketing process and then maybe what that leads into and what's on the horizon.
So I'll start us with this one. As far as marketing for the Chacon textbook with F.A. Davis, really, that's in their court. They have all of the connections. They know how they're distributing the book. They know what ways to package the book in terms of electronic formatting. So really, that's one thing that is us as authors, or editors for the 5th edition update, we leave that to them. That's their expertise. So that's something that we leave towards their hands. If it's an independent publication, then marketing could be looking to tap into the circles. Who's your audience? So we have had those conversations of making sure that what we're writing is for the audience that they want to market to. So you do need to have an understanding of what the process is, even though we're not in the weeds with the process. We needed to know up front, this is a textbook that's for DPT students and entry-level programs. Like we needed to know it's for rehab professionals. So those are things that we needed to have that conversation. But in terms of who to reach out to and when, and like the booksellers or all of that, that's something that's really out of our purview in terms of for F.A. Davis. I don't know what other book publishers would be doing, but we're not involved in that process with F.A. Davis.
So just to sort of add to that, and in our particular case, the Chacon pharmacology book is well known. So we're sort of continuing work. So the word is already out there. People are excited to hear that it'll be updated, which is a great thing. I don't know, Ken, I don't know if this is before I was involved with it. Is there anything when you, for example, the 3rd edition of the PT in the Home, so that was a new, I guess you had the 1st and the 2nd edition, but that was a little bit different in terms of the publishing process. I don't know if there's anything that might be helpful to talk about there.
So actually that, you bring up a good point. When we created the 3rd edition, our audience was for clinicians that were practicing in the home, whether they were new clinicians or they were seasoned clinicians. Our primary target audience were clinicians. But aside from that, we wanted to make a resource that was also good for regulators to have. We wanted to try to identify and define what the scope of PT practice is in the home from a PT's point of view and not have it all dictated. And so where there was gray area, we purposely put in the book what was gray, what was not in the third edition. And so at the end of that product, one way that we marketed that book was we actually sent it to all 50 state boards to have that book. So we made sure that it was out there and that all the state boards had the book. We also marketed it through the APTA Learning Center, not through the Learning Center, the APTA store, I should say. And so we knew our marketing would be through the APTA mothership and through the home health section at that point. So it was available online that way. And for the fourth edition, the one that we're currently writing, the plan for that is probably to be published through the Academy of Home Health by itself. I don't know what the final plan will be, but the goal for this book is really, again, for practicing clinicians. But we wanted to make sure that it's also applicable for PT school, knowing that PTs are going from their didactic into their clinical work and then right into practice in the home health setting. So we felt that this is a book that is an area that's really not discussed very much in academia in terms of the home health setting. So we wanted to add that knowledge to entry-level practice through the book.
Yeah, that's awesome. I teach PCM2, which kind of talks about a bunch of different settings that we can go into as physical therapists, and home health is one of them. It's the last one, but being a former home health therapist, I like to harp on it a little bit more than some of the other sections, just because that's my passion. So, and I have a ton of people that are constantly asking me questions about home health and is it worth it? What about this? Do you feel scared? Are you on your own little island? How does it work? So I'm sure that'll be a great resource for them to kind of turn to. So I appreciate that. But like I said, what's next for you guys? What's on the horizon? Are you got more textbooks lined up? Are you one and done? That was enough? What are you guys working on next?
Well, we are in the process of moving towards starting the 6th edition. So that's really the next big project, is the 6th edition, which will be a total rewrite, new table of contents for the pharmacology text. And we're looking to add more content related to clinical practice. We all know what happened with COVID. And so we wanted to add more information regarding what does clinical practice look like in terms of precautions, contact precautions, and things like that. And people are like, yeah, well, that's not a pharmacology textbook. Well, it really is when we talk about wound care and we talk about these other aspects of PT practice. Universal precautions is embedded, and contact-based precautions, and also all of the other isolation precautions. We're looking to see how that would fit into a textbook so that it's comprehensive.
I feel like that, we just again, being open to opportunities, ended up in a great spot in the opportunity to update the 5th edition. So we got a little bit of a taste of the process. But essentially what Ken and I are starting to embark on now is going to be a multi-year process, so it'll be a few years, before I see my way out. So in my mind, coming off the co-editors, the 5th edition update, the 6th edition is the next step. And, as he indicated, a whole new table of contents. So there'll be a lot more, writing. So, it'd be great, to be associated with this textbook for a little while. It'd be a great opportunity.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll have to have you guys on again in a couple of years when the next edition's out. We'll give the update. Well, guys, we have one final question that we like to ask all of our guests. And that question is, if you could change one aspect of higher education, whether it be DPT or otherwise, what aspect would you change and how would you change it? Melissa, we'll start with you.
Oh, I might need a minute to think.
Well, Ken, you've done it already. So go ahead and give us your updated version, then we'll give Melissa a minute.
I'm very curious to what I had said back in 2017 when I was last on your show.
Yeah, I'll look it up for you.
You have to take a look and give a comparison. But I would have to say that the most important thing I think that we need to do in PT, and I'm really very passionate about it, and it's a little bit aside from the pharmacology content, I think we absolutely have to look where we are and where we're going to be in 5 years. And if we are going to be visionary, then we need to incorporate new technology into our curriculum. We need to have therapists graduating with that technology, and we need to make sure we're reimbursed for it. Using diagnostic ultrasound is a key part. We hear about the expansion of blood flow restriction and how that may be beneficial for certain populations. There are people that are on the bandwagon with dry needling and other things. And I'm not looking to say we need to just jump on board a specific intervention. I'm saying we need to really look at how we do practice and make sure that we are doing as much as we can to stay technologically advanced. When I see clinicians pace out 10 feet for their timed up and go, and we know that there are other ways of measuring that distance, and it looks very unprofessional, that is the optics that we show. And then we get paid for those optics. So I think that there are ways of doing things that are much more technologically sound and more accurate. And that's really, I think we need to look at where we are and where we need to be. Otherwise, we fall behind. If we're not growing, we're dying. So that's my soapbox.
Telehealth, right? I mean, that's a big one. And
telehealth, exactly.
We showed very, I think pretty competently we were able to do very well with that over COVID. Now we're having to fight for it again and make sure that it's, still reimbursable, because right now they're looking to pull it away again. So we're right back to square one. So I agree. I think that's a good initiative, is to use the technological advancements and make sure that we're staying, finger on the pulse, at least, of what's out there and how we can better improve our patient care, for sure. Melissa, you're up.
So, I guess we'll just have to trust me saying this, but as, Ken started talking, I'm sort of formulating my thought. And, I think this just goes to show, right? We're kind of, how well we collaborate, because I had a similar, but yet a little bit of a different twist in terms of, with higher education, certainly thinking about physical therapy, is connecting the clinic in, connecting clinical practice with education. So for example, being in education, I think there's things that I have to teach, knowing that, for example, the national boards, et cetera, are requiring it. But I mean, from a clinical practice perspective, they're not really done, versus sort of you have to get those things in, and you might not have time for more of the contemporary type of things that we're seeing in practice. So, sort of kind of matching, the pace of which clinical practice changes with that, the pace, which is much slower, that higher education, and just the processes, thinking, about, accreditation and, national boards. I mean, yes, there are updates, all the time, but it's a much slower process than what we're seeing in the clinic. All the evidence that's coming out, I think we're doing a pretty good job as a profession of trying our best to keep up with it, but it's not reflected in the entry level education. So I think, I'd like to see that sort of continue to improve.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons this podcast was started, right? To try to connect that bridge between the ivory tower of academia and clinical work, right? There's sort of a disconnect there, and we need to find ways to just bridge that gap and make it a little more seamless, I think, going from learning in the classroom setting to now learning in the real world setting. So I can definitely appreciate that, for sure. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking your time and for coming on the show and educating the audience on all things textbook. Like I said, this was a first. We have 260 some odd episodes, and this was our first time talking about textbooks. So I'm glad that we got the conversation started. At least I'm now a lot more interested in the process. So, who knows, if that opportunity comes, I may just have to seize it. Where can people reach out to you? Where can they find you on social media or email or whatever, if they have follow-up questions or just want to see what you guys are up to?
So I think the easiest way to find me on social media would be through Twitter. My Twitter handle is at KENMPT. So that's pretty easy. If you Google my name, you probably will find me, with some of the different projects that I've been on. University of North Texas, you could easily find my email there. So I think I'm pretty easy to find on the net.
So admittedly, actually, I had to think, I do have Twitter, but I'll admit that actually at this point, I actually sort of just follow things. I'm not really active in terms of posting, but ML Bednarek is out there. I actually haven't had to think. I was like, what is my Twitter? But yeah, I mean, certainly just Googling through, my contacts through the program at Chatham is probably the best.
And we'll put all those links in the show notes so people can reach out to you. Thank you again so much for your time. And like I said, I look forward to catching up with you guys in a couple of years when the next editions are out.
Thank you so much for having us.
Hey, Scott, I'd like to add one last thing. Thank
Yes,
you
sir.
very much again for having us. But I want to give a shout out to Jennifer Pine from FA Davis, because she's the one she reached out coldly, a cold call to Melissa to get this project first started. So, she showed trust in her and Melissa and myself. So I would like to thank her for the trust that she has in us to build on Dr. Chacon's work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you guys are working on the Bible of pharmacology. So this is pretty neat. I mean, you guys are getting to take the ball and run with it. So, anybody who can put that project together, shout out to them. That's awesome. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Access to healthcare is one of the largest issues facing both providers and patients, as millions of people worldwide lack timely and affordable access to healthcare. Anywhere Healthcare, a telehealth platform, is a simple, low-cost option for providers and patients that eliminates the barriers to access to all kinds of healthcare. To find out more, check out anywhere.healthcare, which is available on our show notes. And if you use the code HET in all caps when you email to sign up, you'll save 25% off the total cost. Thank you for attending class today, and we hope that you learned something and gained value from the content.
If you'd like to schedule office hours with us, feel free to add us on Twitter at HET Podcast, on Instagram, HET Podcast, on Facebook, the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast, and the homepage, healthcareeducationtransformationpodcast.com.
And for those of you following along in the syllabus, extra credit can be obtained by liking us, sharing us, and leaving a review.
Let's continue our journey up Mount Educational Success as lifelong learners.